Hello everybody, Chocolate Guy here, and welcome back to another video. Happy October, the month of Halloween, which is one of my favorite holidays. You wouldn't know that by how much of an empty wasteland my channel is during the month of October usually. Well, that's gonna change this year. Throughout the month of October, each Saturday I'll be releasing some at least slightly Halloween-related videos, starting with a video about the short-lived, underappreciated show, Making Fiends. I love this show. I'd heard bits and pieces about this weird, short-lived Nicktoons original that was kind of dark and edgy, quote-unquote, but not much other than that it existed. Until last year, when I watched a review about it and thought the show itself and the circumstances around it sounded really interesting, and so I watched it and absolutely loved pretty much everything about it. I think the world is super fun, while also being depressingly but also hilariously dark. I really enjoy the simple art style. It adds to the show's weird charm, where the world and characters look kinda simple and seem so on the outside, but in actuality, there's a lot of really interesting, messed up things going on. And I love the characters and their dynamics. Charlotte and Vendetta are such a fun and interesting pairing. Vendetta is this evil monster, but she has such a distinct personality and just kinda wants to cause chaos, but also the rest of the time just wants to be left alone, because she finds everyone else, especially Charlotte, really annoying, which is unseriously such a mood. Charlotte, on the other hand, is so happy-go-lucky all the time and just loves Vendetta and wants to sing and have fun and thinks about nothing else but that. So she is the polar opposite of Vendetta, and this leads to so many fun episodes that play off of this dynamic. You're never quite sure how naive Charlotte really is, and if she knows what she is doing and is intentionally fucking with Vendetta, or if she is her own weird brand of chaotic evil. For the record, I don't know if I believe any of that, but it's interesting to view the episodes through that lens. This show finds just the right balance of taking itself seriously enough that it can have some really complex and interesting moments, specifically when it comes to the side characters, but is just silly and cartoony enough that sometimes when Charlotte is being so intrusive and annoying, you find yourself kinda sympathetic for Vendetta, to at least get Charlotte to leave her alone. You obviously don't support Vendetta or want Charlotte to be killed, of course, but it's still an interesting element. Another interesting element of the show is that Charlotte doesn't actually help this town or any of the townspeople in it. In fact, she kind of makes the townspeople's current situation worse a lot of the time, once again kind of being her own brand of chaos. There's so many fantastic episodes in this show because of how interesting and fun these characters are, with our main characters being so insane, which allows our side characters to be more down to earth for the most part, but also very interesting, which leads to great episodes of their own. This show also has many other great elements, like awesome songs and so much subversive dark humor, and once again, some actual complex, interesting stuff brought up when the show does dive in to the actual implications of what's going on in this world, especially with these side characters' lives. This was such an awesome and different show for the time that really gives kids something different and adults something they can also sink their teeth into. With episodes being 8 minutes and the whole thing being a little over 2 hours, it's easy and a blast to watch. There's so much more they could have done with our main character's dynamic, whether that's exploring it more or just doing more fun stories around it. And they could have had way more episodes centered around side characters. The fact that we never got a Maggie, that depressed student, centered episode is a crime. It's ridiculous how Nickelodeon cowered down when it came to make the show, not wanting to go through with such a different and darker show, and decided to shove it on Nicktoons, not promote it, and canceling it abruptly. And on top of all of that, taking the rights of the property so the creator couldn't use it for anything else in the future, including continuing the web series the show was based on. It's so stupid and upsetting. But with all that, we're still left with a solid batch of interesting episodes. So today, I'm gonna talk about the worst and best episode of the series, along with a lot of other great episodes the show has to offer, because there are a lot of them and I do want to talk about as many as I can. But before we get into all that, let's start with So in all seriousness, I like to really love everything in the show, as you'll see when I go over the episodes that were close to taking the best spot. There are two, though, that I think are on the higher end of okay, which isn't bad by any means, so this segment won't be long. I just thought since I'm only covering the show once, because it's so short, I should just do a worst episodes portion. So both episodes were close in quality, but Marvin the Middle Manager was just spared from being given the worst episode title. Look, I like Marvin as a character. He's got a funny way of speaking and has some great moments throughout the show, including in this episode, which brings it up a lot. But I don't think they do a lot with this concept of Marvin managing Vendetta's monsters with Charlotte, and then him having to try and destroy her. Most of the stuff feels very paint by numbers for the show, besides some jokes that really work, and then when he has to do the horrible thing, he's not actually that conflicted by it because Charlotte doesn't really understand what's going on, which could be interesting and really funny, but they don't do much with that either. It's just a very simple and underwhelming episode that could have gotten more interesting jokes and scenes out of its concept. But Parent Trapped is just a little worse. It's kind of middle of the road for very similar reasons Marvin the Middle Manager is. But what I think makes this one slightly worse is that the concept is even better, and I feel they get less from it. Our two characters swapping parents and us seeing what crazy shenanigans or interesting scenes come out of it is such a great idea, but it all plays out exactly how you would expect, with very little surprises. Nothing of note particularly happens on Vendetta's side with Charlotte's grandma, and while there are some good jokes on Charlotte's side with Vendetta's parents, an amount of it is just them getting hurt and her being dumb in non-interesting ways that just feels like stuff done better in other episodes. Once again, this episode isn't a total waste. The setup is good, and you do get a little insight into Vendetta and her parents' relationship, and there are some pretty ridiculous and funny moments. But overall, this was just the most underwhelmed I was with an episode of Making Fiends, which is why I think it's the show's worst episode. Now, on to the best.
I have a big surprise for you.
So, there was one episode that really did stand tall above all the rest, even for how great the show was. But there were so many fantastic episodes that I'm gonna give a mention to 8 others for just being really stellar in their own right. So, I'll go in order from 8 to the runner-up. This is just a really fun romp with our two characters, and I think there are a lot of good jokes in the first part with Vendetta's statue, and I think the second half is really fun with Charlotte just being so careless and nearly killing Vendetta many times when Vendetta's plan backfires with these exploding chicks as Vendetta tries to get out of this situation. There's also a hilarious song in the middle that takes full advantage of this conflict. This is a case where in some weird way you kind of start to feel for Vendetta a little bit, even if she brought this all on herself and definitely deserves everything that's coming to her. Also, there's a funny ending wrapping the episode up with the statue being destroyed. This is a more basic episode of the show, which is why it's lower than other episodes I'll talk about, but I can't deny how fun it is and absolutely earns a mention here. I think this episode's concept is genius, and it's cool they use this concept almost immediately because it would have been a real shame if we never got an episode around this idea. Vendetta thinking Charlotte is secretly super evil is hilarious, and through the episode we get so many great scenes that show off each of their personalities and kind of picks apart how their brains work, along with having so many funny moments and some cool subversion of how the show usually operates, with Vendetta actively interested in Charlotte, and the way she actually takes her advice also leads to a great scene involving her scaring people with cookies. And it also leads to a predictable but still funny ending. For how much I like this episode and its concept, I don't think it goes as far with it as some other episodes do with theirs, which is why this is only number 7. This is just a really fun episode involving a shrinking and growing gimmick, with its own making Fiends spin of Vendetta's plan going wrong in a very chaotic way, and Charlotte having a positive spin on everything to make Vendetta's life literally pain, which had me dying. Top that all off with a fun conclusion and a great song in the middle, and you have one of the quintessential episodes of this series. Well, this one shrunk on me just a little after rewatching it for this list, as I do think there are slightly more creative and just better episodes overall. Everything I said about this episode still stands. I think the second half of this episode is really fun when Vendetta comes to her senses and starts destroying the cheese world. But the reason this episode is so good is the first chunk, where they're both in Charlotte's dream, or having the same dream, I guess, and are actually having a good time. It's really weird and kind of cursed to see Vendetta enjoy being with Charlotte before she breaks out of this hold the dream has on her. But it leads to many cute and funny moments for just how strange it is. And the cheese song might be my favorite of the show for this reason. Also, out of all the shorter episodes with little added stuff at the end, the Moon Song might also be my favorite of those additions. There's a lot of good moments in it. Another absolute winner from the show, and it wouldn't even crack the top 5. This is one of the few episodes that delves into one of the side characters, and it's great. Marion is cool because of how much of a normal person she is at the beginning of the episode and actually has plans to escape. And then both Vendetta and Charlotte unintentionally get in the way. I especially like how Charlotte actively, unintentionally, or honestly intentionally, I really don't know, Charlotte is kind of a menace, outs her plans and distaste of Vendetta to Vendetta. It's really funny and interesting seeing Marion's views slowly change as she warms up to Vendetta and starts hating Charlotte for this reason. Also, as Vendetta realizes she can use her to make Charlotte jealous. We get so many funny moments out of this, and once again, this whole dynamic is fun to watch play out. I wish this episode had a little more of an interesting ending, but it makes sense for the show, and keeps up the norm of how Charlotte and Vendetta kind of make everyone miserable. Poor Marion, man. Also, this episode could be a little mean-spirited, but I think the way they go about it is just more funny and lighthearted than anything, while still being pretty dark in places, so I don't think it comes across that way. I like this episode because it shows what Vendetta's literal hell would look like, and we get a lot of creative and cursed scenes out of it. And I think this episode is a good experiment of how far the show can push Charlotte's intrusiveness to make you kind of feel a little bad for Vendetta. And the episode has a lot of fun just showing off what Vendetta's worst nightmare would look like, and it's really interesting to watch. I don't have much to say other than I find the dynamic in this episode really interesting, and I think they get so much great stuff out of a really good concept. I think this is the funniest episode of the show. The setup is good, and I really like the creation scene of the specific fiend who attacks anyone that's singing. But the best part of the episode is that horribly depressing cat story. That's a little funny for just how dark it is, but actually serves to give us insight into how some, if not all, the townsfolk are feeling about their current situation, and is the only thing in the entire show that really moves Charlotte, even if it's for more simple reasons, with her not understanding the context. And the rest of the episode is so funny and just has so many hilarious moments of Vendetta trying to make Charlotte happy so she will sing, while not understanding how to do that at all and getting more desperate, along with not just cutting her losses and finding a different way to get rid of Charlotte. I love pretty much everything about this episode. Every little moment is so funny and interesting, from the little one-liners to just how bad Vendetta is at this, to her just defeated facial expression, and acting more like Charlotte as the episode goes along to get her to sing is all just so perfect. But there are 2 episodes that I somehow think are more impressive than this one. So this one was very close to taking the best episode title, as I think this is one of the most interesting episodes of the show that tackles some meaningful stuff involving Charlotte and her circumstances. First, we get to learn about Vendetta's circumstances with her parents and how she used the shrinking slug on them, which is cool how that gimmick was established last episode, and in this one we see that she actually has used it before on her parents to have control over them. It's interesting to see her parents are kind of at her will, but also kind of don't really care and have just accepted their new life, while still trying not to overstep their boundaries and step on Vendetta's toes in fear of retribution. The episode gets some good scenes out of this, but Charlotte is the best part of this episode. We get to learn that her parents aren't around, but she has been told by her grandmother that they went to space, when obviously they're dead. The episode really doesn't try to hide that at all. It's super messed up and sad, but also true to life, especially when you have older caretakers who don't really want to explain to young kids what happened to close people around them who passed away, or don't think they can handle that quite yet. But the episode does get some good humor around this situation, with Vendetta creating monsters that resemble her parents and also space monsters in order to destroy her. But instead, we get this really hilarious but sweet montage and song, with Charlotte just being so happy to have her quote-unquote parents back. And at first, she just hurts the monsters by accident while singing this cute, innocent song, but slowly we get to see her actually bond with them, and it's actually really heartwarming. The scenes where the monsters start to warm up to Charlotte are the sweetest and most adorable in the show. But like in any episode of Making Fiends, all nice things must stop. And the ending to this episode is one of the most messed up, but so fucking funny for just how dark it is. Vendetta catches whiff of all of this and tries to destroy the monsters she created, but they end up accidentally getting eaten by a whale. But because of shenanigans, Charlotte thinks her parents went back into space and is none the wiser about anything. It's a messed up and depressing ending, masked in a happy one that's just so fucked up, but also gives you one last depressing detail that Charlotte's parents haven't been gone for very long, because she is the same age in both photos shown, with her actual parents and her weird monster ones, I guess. Just such a weird but compelling episode that I get so much out of. But there is still one I like better, and that episode is... So while I have a lot of thoughts on the show, I really had no intention to ever talk about it on this channel. But the more I thought about this episode in particular, the more I was dying to dive into it and why it's amazing, which led me to make this video. So let's get into what makes Toupee the best episode the show has to offer, and a true gem amongst episodes created by Nickelodeon, especially stuff aired specifically on the side Nicktoons network. So this episode follows Mr. Milk, who is probably the saddest character on the show. Maybe not the most depressed, but definitely the most sad. He is socially awkward, anxious, and kind of a spineless man, which is especially bad in this world where Vendetta controls everything and there are fiends running around. He seems to be semi-interested in teaching, but doesn't get to do that because Vendetta, with her red bird, controls what he does. And no one, including his actual peers at the school, really seem to respect him much or know he is there. He is such an interesting character, especially in a show like this, and this episode does so much with him. The opening really establishes all of this and the person he is, and then has him getting a gift from Charlotte, which is so cute and wholesome, and you can just feel how happy this makes him, and that this really has never happened before, and he has never really been shown this level of kindness. This leads to Vendetta having an idea. You're not sure what her angle is, but she gives him a talking toupee that starts doing a lot of the talking for Mr. Milk, making him seem more confident to everyone around him, and finally getting another teacher he's interested in to notice him and want him to go to her book club. And then he starts to realize what this toupee could help him accomplish, and starts dreaming about what his dream life would look like, and starts fantasizing about being a Swiss banker and living in Switzerland with his love interest. And it's really sweet and wholesome, and the song is really charming, one of the show's best. It's deceptively uplifting, watching this man going from having a hopeless life to having all this hope about the future be created throughout the episode, and you really want to see all of it come true for him. But you know, this is making Fiends, and this is a gift from Vendetta, so the rug has gotta be pulled out from under him in some way. And it does, because he has to kill Charlotte to get it. This is such a good twist. Even though it's predictable, it still kinda catches you off guard with how happy Mr. Milk is beforehand. Also, he actively considers it and gets so many chances to do so because Charlotte refuses to not be super dangerous to a ridiculous extent, and it's some of the funniest stuff of the show. But when I say Mr. Milk considers it, I don't just mean he kinda thinks about it a little bit, but you know he's not gonna go through with it. No, he really thinks about it. And there are so many points where he is super close to actually doing so. The show is so sick. We really get to see just how screwed up and beaten down by life this man is, that he does deeply consider almost taking an opportunity out that involves murder. Even when he walks over and does throw away the toupee and saves Charlotte, I honestly believe from how he is acting that when he started walking, he intended on going through with it, and came so close and changed his mind pretty much last second. It really could have gone either way. And with him throwing the toupee away, this episode leaves you with two things. One, he gets really nothing for this. He's back to being a shy, spineless individual who no one really notices or cares about. Not even Charlotte, just back to his miserable life, which is brutal reality and pretty complex for a kid's show. But the other thing this one leaves you with is that you really don't know if he would have thrown it all away if it was another kid who hadn't done a nice deed for him recently, like Charlotte. And you really don't know if that one good deed is what kept him from going through with this horrible act. I like to believe he would not go through with this no matter what, but I honestly don't. Which is also really complex for a kid's show. This episode has so much to offer, and is one of the most interesting ones I've talked about on this channel. This episode alone makes this series worth checking out, and once again, it is a crime this show got canned. If we could have gotten even one more episode like this one, even ignoring all the other amazing stuff this show has to offer. So yeah, Toupee, easily the best episode of Making Fiends.
My dreams? Could I be Christmas banger.
And with all that said, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe for more videos similar to this in the future. Also, leave me a comment telling me what you thought of my video and what your own thoughts on making Fiends are. It's really such an interesting show that deserves more discussion, which it has been starting to get in recent years. Stay tuned for next Saturday, where I'll be releasing a list of the top 5 worst classic Nicktoons Halloween episodes. And until then, this is Chocolate Guy, signing off.